Hello everyone and welcome to the second webinar of UNPREDICT, a 361-degree mind powered program on futuring. This is our second webinar as a run-up to the program that is scheduled in the month of March 22nd and 23rd in Singapore. Today in this very exclusive webinar, we have our panelist, Mr. Manoj Fenelon, who joins us from US. He's a leading foresight strategist. Very warm welcome to you, Manoj.
Thank you, Ruchita.
And we have our second panelist, Mr. C.P. Gopinathan. He is a very successful entrepreneur, among many other things that he does. He is joining us from Delhi, India. A very warm welcome to you, Gopi.
Hi, Ruchita. Thank you for the intro. Hi, Manoj.
Hi, Gopi.
A very warm welcome to our participants who join us from across the globe and come from very distinguished organizations, and they all hold very senior positions. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking the time to join this webinar. Disruptive Innovation 321. Let's get started with that. Disruptive innovation is a very trending topic among CXO circles today. Now, let us begin this webinar, which will give us a very crisp understanding of what is disruptive innovation, and how new age strategy planning gets impacted by that. So it's going to be very crisp answers and rapid fire round. That's the first round that we will get started with. So we'll get started with both the panelists now. The question one is on foresight. Manoj, can you please name 3 technology trends that are likely to cause disruption?
Thank you, Ruchita. I want to start by thanking all the people who are joining us. Thank you for taking time out and being interested. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I don't know if what I'm going to say is exclusively applicable to technology. It might be broader than that. And also the same goes with 2018. The horizon might be a little broader. The first thing I'll say is I think there is a change coming in the way we talk about disruption. I find the word disruption to evokes a lot of fear, and a lot of fear of something from the outside that's going to happen to you. I much prefer another word that's being used, transformation, which involves a much more internally directed view on the future. And I think there's also another difference in that transformation has a purpose. And the purpose that a lot of people are starting to talk about is to solve social problems. Whether you're a business or you're a government or any entity that's a combination, your ultimate purpose is going to be solving the large scale problems that we're all living under, and not just oriented towards profit. So that's the first one. The second one, I think we're going to hear a lot about biomimicry. And the name is very revealing in this case. We're gaining a new understanding of life, which seems startling as a statement because we think we all understand life, but turns out we don't really. We've been working against the principles of life in a lot of the things that we've created in the last 200 years. And we're finally starting to realize that taking cues from nature and working with nature, even in the fields of engineering, material science, informatics, etc., is going to be a new wave. Biomimicry. And I'll end with a wave that's composed of many different individual trends, but I'll sum it up by saying it's a sentiment that's going to be enveloping the world, which is roughly speaking, whose data and whose internet is it? Because I think it's a backlash and a response to the current model of the internet. I find it very interesting that a lot of the bigwigs in Silicon Valley are now undergoing mindfulness training or voluntarily seeking spiritual help, for lack of a better word, because they're afraid of what they've created. And my way of summing up what they've created is the current model of the internet, which runs on 3 things: surveillance, they're watching us all the time; advertising, they're watching us in order to sell our data to other people; and addiction. It's the efforts they make to keep us on their platforms and their site. This is the current business model of the internet, and that is going to change because it has to.
Right. Thank you, Manoj. Gopi, can you please name 3 organizations that build immunity to disruption, if I can use that word?
See, I think this was a trick question for me in a sense that I really don't know whether anyone can build a permanent immunity to disruption. So, so in that sense that I have to first kind of lay the context as an you have to be, it is very difficult to build something called a permanent immunity. But however, what is looking good now, maybe for the next 2, 3, 4 years, or in the past 8 to 10 years, organizations that have been constantly disrupting. And when I look at them, a few names that come to my mind is Alphabet is one name that comes to my mind. Amazon is another name that comes to my mind. IKEA, Apple, Volkswagen, Samsung, and also central governmental agencies, be it regulatory in nature, financial regulatory in nature, central banks in nature. They're constantly, keeping pace with the new disruptions, new regulations. So I think these are some organizations that come to my mind, and why I specifically think so. Even Microsoft, to some extent, have invested very heavily in the cloud business, the search business. I think they're all managing to build immunity. To step back, and what kind of connects all of this organization is what Manoj talked about: being purpose-led, being socially very, very relevant. And third, I think empowerment and democracy is at the key of all of these organizations. And what kind of fascinates me is that all the names that I took, innovation and democracy are at its core. And innovation, democracy at its core, with an organic view of the world, with a purpose, and most importantly, with the social well-being. I think these are some possible footprints of organizations that can build immunity temporarily to disruption.
Thank you, Gopi. Our next question is going to be on insight. I will have the first question going to Manoj. Manoj, can you please name 2 industry myths that business leaders should not believe in current times?
I'll link the first part of the answer to what Gopi was talking about in a sense, which is the idea of building a permanent immunity being somewhat of a myth. So I'll say one of the myths is that planning works, right? I think one of the myths that is so pervasive because planning has served people well in a relatively stable time where you could extrapolate from the past, and people are still holding on to that myth even in the face of unprecedented volatility and change. So I think the sooner you let go of the myth that planning is the route to future success and try some other ways, I think that's going to be helpful. Another one, and going along with that, is sort of acceptance of the unknown and acceptance that you cannot know some things, and therefore you have to try some other ways of moving ahead into the future. The other myth that I find is when people look around for innovative parts of their company, if you're a business leader, human relations or HR is the last place that people get to, in my experience, and I'm generalizing a little bit. So people often look to product development, R&D, finance, even these days, all kinds of things are the usual suspects for innovation. People are not looking at people. And I think HR is going to be one of the major arenas for innovation going forward, because there's a lot of people potential that's being wasted and left on the table, primarily because they're not allowed to participate in decision-making, which is what Gopi was touching on when he talked about democracy in the workplace. Participative decision-making is so crucial to innovation. So if that's being ignored, I think that's one of the myths. And also, I think all of these in some ways relate to a fundamental divide between management and workers. That's the result of a 200-year-old assumption that's not being challenged at all. And I think in a lot of small organizations, organically, they've dissolved some of those boundaries between who's management and who's doing the work. And you'll find that more and more the activities are intertwined, which also brings in more participation from the people formerly called as workers into activities that were formerly called management activities, like strategic planning, for one.
That was very helpful, Manoj. Thank you. Gopi, my question to you is, can you please name 2 organizations that failed to strategize in a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, VUCA, as it's called, environment?
Yeah, I would not like to name them because I'll possibly be doing disservice to them, but I will name a couple of case studies, I'm sure you can connect the dots and know which companies I'm talking about. There's a very famous digital imaging company from the US, and which was a major player prior to this telephone technology, and subsequently just didn't catch on at all. So that's one name that comes to my mind. Second is there are two famous phone brands, one with an excellent messaging system, another with a phenomenal market share in the world. They just didn't know the smartphone wave was coming, and they didn't know what hit them. And I can think of many conventional uh, book chains, gift chains, which have been completely disrupted by the internet e-commerce. Also, many conventional taxi operators who had invested a lot of money in radio technology all over the world were just completely swept away by the Ubers of the world. But I can go on and list. But if I just come back and try to connect my answer to one thing what Manoj said, that not only technology needs to mimic bioorganisms, organizations need to mimic bioorganisms.
Mhm.
It's very critical that I think the more you're structured, the more you're inflexible, the more you're top down, the more you're non-democratic, the more you don't have extraordinary talent. I think all of them are asking for failure to strategize in VUCA. Look at anything which is bio. The decision making is uniform. My toe cells has got as much decision making power as my hair cells, as my thigh cells, and they all respond to environment in a very organic way, and they're all empowered to do, and they all have similar talent. They get the same food from my body. So we need to mimic organizations to kind of build something which can face disruptions and which will not become extinct against VUCA.
Thank you, Gopi. Uh, the third question of the rapid fire round is on action. So, Gopi, this time the first question goes to you. Can you please name one hashtag to add to Business Leaders Dictionary?
Yeah, I was actually tempted to say that hashtag no hashtag, because hashtag is now kind of becoming a pain. But let me stick to the design of the question. So if I stick to the design of the question, I would say something around learning, something around hashtag learning, hashtag unlearning, hashtag status quo, hashtag biomimicry. These will be some of the hashtags that I would request industry leaders to tag and track and see how things happen around these keywords.
That's great. Manoj, can you please name or spell out one tweet that business leaders can perhaps retweet to their stakeholders on a daily basis or a very regular basis?
That's a hard one, Ruchita. I'm not on Twitter. I heard recently that they expanded the character limit, so I suppose I could say 2 sentences instead of one. I'll quote a foresight grandfather, if you will, because I think he has a wonderful thought to convey, and it's sort of I hope it surprises people. It's meant to. The person I'm referring to is a person called Jim Dator, D-A-T-O-R. He founded one of the world's leading foresight education programs. It's at the University of Hawaii. So if you're interested in getting a master's degree in strategic foresight and enjoying scenic Hawaii, you couldn't find a better combination of program and location. But Jim Dator, one of the things he talked about was any useful statement about the future must at first sound completely absurd. And I've taken that to heart because it goes to why this way of tackling the future is so different from the other one. Because one of the first things that you do is come up with propositions or statements about the future that sound completely absurd from the viewpoint of where you are in the present, which ironically shows the power of this mode of approaching the future, which enables you to prepare and potentially navigate uncertainty much better than assuming that you know things that you don't know.
That's great. That was very helpful, Manoj. So we move on to the second part of our web hash, which is DIY, which is do it yourself session. Now we see self-help, do it yourself. Some of these have been trending immensely amongst professionals, amongst leaders, and Google, internet are always coming to the rescue, because you can always look up things and you can always try and do things yourself, build things yourself, learn things yourself. So this is a DIY session. I will have questions for both the panelists. The first question is, Manoj, maybe you can get started with that. Please name 3 words that will be obsolete in strategic planning 2018 and perhaps even beyond.
3 words in strategic planning. Let's say planning itself. So you could have strategic thinking, but it's not going to involve a lot of planning. I don't mean to paint these things as 0 or 100. It's a sort of a proportionality thing, but there's going to be less planning in strategic planning. The other words that are going to become obsolete is one I've mentioned already, that it's sort of a management activity, that it's sort of meant to be done by just the top people in a corporation. That thought, I can't put a word to it. Let's say it's elitism in strategic planning. That's going to become obsolete. What else? I think our ideas of data are going to change. What constitutes data for strategic planning is going to look very different. It's not, because most strategic planning involves data from the core of the organization. So it's usually operational trends or marketing trends or sales trends from the past few years extrapolated into the future. And I think the data around a different way of thinking about the future is going to come from, for example, trend spotting, which is a completely different orientation to data collecting than just running Excel spreadsheets from the past.
Okay, it's very helpful. Gopi, the same question goes to you again now. Please name 3 words that will be obsolete in your viewpoint in strategic planning 2018.
I think there are a lot of soft words that are going to come in. I'll give you some examples on what do we mean by soft words. For example, the word competition tracking might change to perceptiveness. And your unique differentiators might change to empathy. Your customer feedback might change to life impacting social score. Your competition might change to collaborative opportunities. So I think a lot of these soft words are going to come in, and they're going to challenge the hard structure. And then you can already hear Satya Nadella talk quite a bit about empathy, and Google talking about perceptiveness, and Manoj was mentioning about businesses impacting life and social space. I think these softer words are going to come in more and replace the harder words like differentiators and customer feedback and MIS and acquisitions, and these words are going to go away. And I quite agree with Manoj that planning itself, planning will remain, but the perspective of planning will change. Because planning kind of gives you a little arrogance about, I know how it's going to pan out, so let me plan it. I think that doesn't contain humility. So that's going to change quite a bit. Maybe it could be more responsible word like co-seeing the future or co-creating. So these are some words I think might come back in the buzz, or at least Manoj and I will make sure it comes in the buzz over the next few years. I'd
like to add one more phrase to that list, Gopi, which is strategic intuition. There are actually a few books that have been written on the subject. I think I know someone at the University of Columbia here in New York City who's talking about strategic intuition. And this is in a fairly conventional MBA program. This is not some hippie outgrowth on the fringes. You know, it's as mainstream as it gets.
It's great. Very, very nice insights from both of you. We go on to the question 2. Manoj, let's start with you again. Name 2 tech buzzwords CEOs, CXOs should learn in 2018.
I find myself responding with words they can lose, and I'm not sure what's going to replace them. One is this monomaniacal focus on algorithms as the thing that's going to save a lot of industries. And what's coming out now is algorithms are ripe with bias. So it's not a terribly techie word, but I would advise a lot of people that are working in technology to pay attention to the biases that are built into algorithms. There was just an article yesterday in the US about how facial recognition technology is very good at recognizing white male faces because that's the database that's been fed into these engines to train them. And for example, the whole project that led to this news article was done by a young African-American woman who's going to MIT, and her own ID card wouldn't get her into some of the MIT buildings because the facial recognition software, even at a place like MIT, is so poor at distinguishing faces that don't belong to the stock category that was fed in to the machine. So bias is one word that I would ask people to pay attention to.
Okay, Gopi, the same question for you now. Please name 2 tech buzzwords that CEOs should learn in 2018.
Yeah, I think the 3 words that I would possibly want to focus is inclusive. I think inclusive for, Manoj was talking about for gender. There could be inclusive for literacy. There could be inclusive on economic variations. So technology that focuses on inclusion is one buzzword. Second, technology that is small, that is simple. You don't need a giant 2,000 data centers to figure that out. That is small, something handy, that's a buzzword. And third is technology that is clean. When I say clean, I don't mean the carbon footprint clean. I mean clean of biases, clean of motives, clean in assisting. So I think these are 3 key words that I would want all the business professionals, is my technology inclusive? Is it small and handy? Is it clean? Is it free of biases? These are 3 things that come to my mind.
Very helpful from both of you. To the last question, Manoj, can you please name 1 skill business leaders should learn in 2018?
Letting go and opening your heart. I don't know if it's a skill. It's kind of an orientation, I think, that's been missing, not from people per se, but from their training. So when I look at business people today, and this is a very broad generalization, there's a human side of them within, which is completely capable, which is why I hesitate to call it a skill that people should learn. But I think there have been a lot of baggage built over that human side of us that is thought to help us navigate the world of business, but it's actually holding us back now because it's not allowing us to be part of a more inclusive, participative society. And there's all these blinders that have limited business people. And that comes from standard business training, where you're taught to think of yourself as an entity that's separate from the rest of the world. Your only relationships with the world outside are dictated by competitiveness. All of these assumptions may have served us. I'm not even sure about that for a period of time, but now they're completely ridiculous and counterproductive. So I think losing all of those acquired baggage from previous business training is going to be a skill in itself.
Gopi, can you please answer that question now? Can you please name 1 skill that business leaders should learn in 2018?
See, I don't know how to kind of use a word for that skill, but to me, the word is about, I don't want to get a little rhetorical by saying, being foolish, but it's about wanting to, what exactly Manoj said, that if the future doesn't sound, that if the statement doesn't sound foolish, then it's not future enough. But at the same time, it's about ability to believe in one foolish statement or the hundreds of foolish statements which are possible. So which also means that, can you stay foolish enough to say, okay, I'll pick this and go after it, and not necessarily because I'm able to connect the dots. It's just because I think this will be a good world to be in. So I possibly want to have that sense of wonder, sense of awe, sense of humility that I don't know this, but let me create this future, is a skill that I would want CEOs to learn. But I'm saying that in this every quarter stock market pressure is going to be very, very difficult. But at least wherever this thinking is possible, can this thinking prevail, is a skill that I would want CEOs to learn.
Great. Thank you so much. These are very, very insightful, very amazing. I think in a very short span, we've managed a very successful webinar, which is getting very, very crisp and condensed insights on a specific topic. Our topic for today was Disruptive Innovation 321. 321 was our format that we had used all along. Coming back to our participants, foresight, insight, action are a very, very key part of techniques that futuring uses. And that's exactly what we will be doing in our workshop, which is UNPREDICT, a futuring program powered by 361-degree Minds. Our facilitators for this program are going to be none other than our very, very amazing panelists on this show today, Mr. Manoj and Mr. Gopi. So, be out there, whether it is to protect your legacy or whether it is to learn how to future-proof your organization. I think futuring is a way that all business leaders need to learn to be able to embrace transformation, the right word to use, Manoj. So for more details, please feel free to write to unpredict@361dm.com. It's been an amazing morning with both of you today. So until next time, thank you so much. Goodbye from everyone here. Thank you, Manoj.
Thank you, participant. Thank you, Manoj.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.